Now this is my 3D printer, it's a Creality Ender3. And although it's really good at 3D printing, it's also really good at acting as a shelf to collect dust. So in today's video, I want to make a 3D printer enclosure to house this. So first of all, it's over to the table saw. I started off with this 4x4. I needed to rip it down to a 49mm square post. This piece of timber is 2.4 meters long, and you can see it moving slightly as I'm feeding it through the table saw, so it would have probably been easier to cut it down to the rough lengths I needed first. Then I flipped the wood over and ripped the other side down, but because I'm stood at the other end of the saw, I couldn't see that the two cuts didn't meet. So when I finished the cut, I was a little confused as to why it wasn't coming apart. Then after a bit of adjustment with the blade, I was able to split the cut wood. Then using this 18mm piece of MDF that used to be a bench top, I cut some of the pieces I required from this, and the other pieces I cut from some 12mm MDF. Over at the miter saw, I measured and cut out 4 lengths at 500mm, and these will form the supports of my enclosure. With everything now cut out, this is what I had to work with. The ripped down square lumber ended up being a rough cut, so yep, you guessed it, the next step is sanding, and lots of it. Because I want to make sure I give the support pieces a thorough sanding, I marked all sides with some pencil marks to ensure I didn't miss any areas. I then sanded everything with 120 grit first before moving up to 240. Don't worry, I won't make you watch me sanding it all, so I'll skip through it. Then I needed to drill out a hole in these two pieces of MDF, and that will be for the paracord to fit through. I did this with a 30mm Forstner bit, but not just any Forstner bit, it happened to be the bluntest one I owned. And then to remove the sharp edges, I went over both holes with a roundover bit in the router. Now I could move on to assembly. The idea is to create a bottom section with these 3 supports. After adding the glue, I could get one corner clamped up after ensuring it was flush with both sides. And then because this piece of MDF is slightly warped, I worked my way along, clamping and checking it was flush as I went. Then after wiping the glue squeeze out off, I could fire in some brad nails, remove the clamps, and then brad nail where the clamps were. I covered the brad nail holes with some wood filler, and then after sanding it flush, it was time to paint everything. I'm using a water-based gloss that I bought from Screwfix, and having never used the brand before, I wasn't sure how the finish would turn out. But the next day, after 2 coats, I was really happy with the smooth, bright finish it left. including being able to see the grain of the wood come through on this support leg. Now to fit the supports, I put down 3 pieces of masking tape, flushed up the leg support with the sides, drew around it, then marked a line between the 2 corners. I could then mark out where I wanted to drill the 2 holes for the screws to go through. So now I've drilled the holes out, hopefully when I remove the tape it doesn't take the paint off with it. Nope, looks good. Then I could rough up the paint so the glue had something to help it bond to, and get the leg supports fitted with 2 screws from underneath. The awkward bit was holding the support straight and flush while fixing it in position. Unfortunately, I didn't have any clamps long enough to hold it in position, but this way worked fine in the end. Then I could add these 3D printed support brackets. The side that the door will hang has these hinges that fit into them, and the brackets just fit in place with a few screws. I could then fit the enclosure part to the base. I added glue around the top before checking it was all square and flush, and then drilled, countersunk, and screwed it all down. Next I could move on to fitting the top. I found it was easier to have the screws already part screwed in, such was the height I was working at. Then I could add wood filler to those holes, and after sanding them flush, I could move on to painting. I also fitted this back panel. I was going to put perspex here, but I thought adding the MDF back may help reduce the noise from the printer. Then with the paint drying, I could fight the storm outside and cut down the perspex to length on the table saw. A face shield would really help here, as the shards from cutting the perspex certainly sting a bit when they hit you in the face. Before I fit the perspex, I'm going to add some of this weather strip to the bottom. It will help hide the screw heads and reduce the amount of dust that gets in the enclosure. It has double-sided tape on the back, so it's really easy to fit and remove if you go wrong. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it in black, so I had to settle for brown. I ended up swapping out the black screws for these silver ones, as I didn't have any short enough that I could drill into the top. I decided to glue the door into the hinges rather than drill the perspex. And then I could fit the last few accessories. Off camera, I made a drawer that fits in the front of this enclosure, and this will hold all the tools that came with the 3D printer. I'm yet to cut out the shadow foam yet though to fit the tools in. So there we go, there's my 3D printer enclosure all built. I can definitely hear that it has reduced the noise put out by this machine. Although it doesn't put out that great a noise, it's still reduced it. There's an added benefit to keeping the heat contained whilst 3D printing, as it can improve the prints. Although, because you are using small fine electronic pieces, you don't want them to overheat and get too hot, so that is why there are some gaps around the perspex to allow some of the heat to escape so it doesn't get too hot in there. The only other thing I wanted to add to this enclosure was some LED light strips, but this video was going on a little bit as it was, so I thought I'd end it there, and I'll do that in a separate video. If you like the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, comment down below, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you again in the next video.